2025. Mandate for Leadership: The Conservative Promise. Foreword by Kevin Roberts, Ph.D. Edited by Paul Don and Stephen Groves. Contents: Acknowledgements. Page 9. The Project 2025 Advisory Board. Page. Xi. The 2025 Presidential Transition Project. A note on Project 2025. Page 13. Authors. Page 15. Contributors. Page 25. Foreword. A Promise to America. Page 1. Kevin D. Roberts, Ph.D. Section 1, Taking the Reins of Government. Page 19. White House Office. Page 23. Rick Dearborn 2. Executive Office of the President of the United States. Page 43. Russ Vought 3. Central Personnel Agencies, Managing the Bureaucracy. Page 69. Donald Devine, Dennis Dean Kirk, and Paul Don Section 2, The Common Defense. Page 87. 4. Department of Defense. Page 91. Christopher Miller 5. Department of Homeland Security. Page 133. Ken Cuccinelli 6. Department of State. Page 171. Kyron K. Skinner 7. Intelligence Community. Page 201. Dustin J. Carmack 8. Media Agencies. Page 235. U.S. Agency for Global Media. Page 235. Mora Namdar Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Page 246. Mike Gonzalez 9. Agency for International Development. Page 253. Max Primorak Section 3. The General Welfare. Page 283. 10. Department of Agriculture. Page 289. Darren Baxt 11. Department of Education. Page 319. Lindsay M. Burke 12. Department of Energy and Related Commissions. Page 363. Bernard L. McNamee 13. Environmental Protection Agency. Page 417. Mandy M. Gunasekara 14. Department of Health and Human Services. Page 449. Roger Severino 15. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Page 503. Benjamin S. Carson, Sr., MD 16. Department of the Interior. Page 517. William Perry Pendley 17. Department of Justice. Page 545. Gene Hamilton 18. Department of Labor and Related Agencies. Page 581. Jonathan Berry 19. Department of Transportation. Page 619. Diana Furcht-Goodroth 20. Department of Veterans Affairs. Page 641. Brooks D. Tucker Section 4. The Economy. Page 657. 21. Department of Commerce. Page 663. Thomas F. Gilman 22. Department of the Treasury. Page 691. William L. Walton, Stephen Moore, and David R. Burton 23. Export-Import Bank. Page 717. The Export-Import Bank should be abolished. Page 717. Veronique Derugi, The Case for the Export-Import Bank. Page 724. Jennifer Hazelton 24. Federal Reserve. Page 731. Paul Winfrey 25. Small Business Administration. Page 745. Karen Kerrigan 26. Trade. Page 765. The Case for Fair Trade. Page 765. Peter Navarro, The Case for Free Trade. Page 796. Kent Lassman Section 5. Independent Regulatory Agencies. Page 825. 27. Financial Regulatory Agencies. Page 829. Securities and Exchange Commission and Related Agencies. Page 829. David R. Burton Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Page 837. Robert Bose 28. Federal Communications Commission. Page 845. Brendan Carr 29. Federal Election Commission. Page 861. Hans A. von Spakovsky 30. Federal Trade Commission. Page 869. Adam Kandub Onward. Page 883. Edwin J. Foilner. Acknowledgements. This work, Mandate for Leadership 2025, The Conservative Promise, is a collective effort of hundreds of volunteers who have banded together in the spirit of advancing positive change for America. Our work is by no means the comprehensive compendium of conservative policies, nor is our group the exclusive cadre of conservative thinkers. The ideas expressed in this volume are not necessarily shared by all. What unites us is the drive to make our country better. First and foremost, we thank the chapter authors and contributors who gave so freely of their time in service of their country. We were particularly grateful to have the help of dedicated members of the Heritage Foundation's management and policy teams. Executive Vice President Derek Morgan, Chief of Staff Wesley Coopersmith, Associate Director of Project 2025 Spencer Chrétien, and Thomas A. Rowe Institute for Economic Policy Studies Director Paul Ray devoted a significant amount of their valuable time to reviewing and editing the lengthy manuscript and provided expert advice and insight. The job of transforming the work of dozens of authors and hundreds of contributors into a cohesive manuscript fell upon Heritage's formidable team of editors led by Director of Research Editors Therese Penfather, Senior Editor William T. Poole, Marla Hess, Jessica Lothar, Karina Rollins, and Kathleen Scaturo, without whose tireless efforts you would not be reading these words. The talented work of Data Graphics Services Manager John Fleming, Manager of Web Development and Print Projects Jay Simon, Director of Marketing Elizabeth Fender, Senior Graphic Designer Grace DeSandro, and Senior Designer Melissa Bluey came together to bring the volume to life. We also thank the dedicated junior staff who provided immeasurable assistance, especially Jordan Embry, Sarah Calves, and Jonathan Moy. Most important, we are grateful to the leadership, supporters, and donors of each of the Project 2025 Advisory Board member organizations and those of the Heritage Foundation, without whom Project 2025 would not be possible. Thank you. Paul Don and Stephen Groves. The Project 2025 Advisory Board, Alabama Policy Institute, Alliance Defending Freedom, American Compass, the American Conservative, America First Legal Foundation, American Accountability Foundation, American Center for Law and Justice, American Cornerstone Institute, American Council of Trustees and Alumni, American Legislative Exchange Council, the American Main Street Initiative, American Moment, American Principles Project, Center for Equal Opportunity, Center for Family and Human Rights, Center for Immigration Studies, Center for Renewing America, Claremont Institute, Coalition for a Prosperous America, Competitive Enterprise Institute, Conservative Partnership Institute, Concerned Women for America, Defense of Freedom Institute, Ethics and Public Policy Center, Family Policy Alliance, Family Research Council, First Liberty Institute, Forge Leadership Network, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Foundation for Government Accountability, Freedom Works, the Heritage Foundation, Hillsdale College Honest Elections Project. 12. Mandate for Leadership. The Conservative Promise, Independent Women's Forum, Institute for the American Worker, Institute for Energy Research, Institute for Women's Health, Intercollegiate Studies Institute, James Madison Institute, Keystone Policy, the Leadership Institute, Liberty University, National Association of Scholars, National Center for Public Policy Research, Pacific Research Institute, Patrick Henry College, Personnel Policy Operations Recovery for America Now Foundation, 1792 Exchange, Susan B. Anthony Pro Life, America Texas Public Policy Foundation, Tenia Network, Young America's Foundation. The 2025 Presidential Transition Project. A note on Project 2025: we want you. The 2025 Presidential Transition Project is the conservative movement's unified effort to be ready for the next conservative administration to govern at 12 noon, January 20, 2025. Welcome to the mission. By opening this book, you are now a part of it. Indeed, one set of eyes reading these passages will be those of the 47th President of the United States, and we hope every other reader will join in making the incoming administration a success. History teaches that a president's power to implement an agenda is at its apex during the administration's opening days. To execute requires a well-conceived, coordinated, unified plan and a trained and committed cadre of personnel to implement it. In recent election cycles, presidential candidates normally began transition planning in the late spring of election year or even after the party's nomination was secured. That is too late. The federal government's complexity and growth advance at a seemingly logarithmic rate every 4 years. For conservatives to have a fighting chance to take on the administrative state and reform our federal government, the work must start now. The entirety of this effort is to support the next conservative president, whoever he or she may be. In the winter of 1980, the fledgling Heritage Foundation handed to President-elect Ronald Reagan the inaugural mandate for leadership. This collective work by conservative thought leaders and former government hands, most of whom were not part of Heritage, set out policy prescriptions, agency by agency, for the incoming president. The book literally put the conservative movement and Reagan on the same page, and the revolution that followed might never have been, save for this band of committed and volunteer activists. With this volume, we have gone back to the future, and then some. 14. Mandate for leadership, the conservative promise. It's not 1980. In 2023, the game has changed. The long march of cultural Marxism through our institutions has come to pass. The federal government is a behemoth, weaponized against American citizens and conservative values, with freedom and liberty under siege as never before. The task at hand to reverse this tide and restore our republic to its original moorings is too great for any one conservative policy shop to spearhead. It requires the collective action of our movement. With the quickening approach of January 2025, we have 2 years and one chance to get it right. Project 2025 is more than 50, and growing, of the nation's leading conservative organizations joining forces to prepare and seize the day. The axiom goes personnel is policy, and we need a new generation of Americans to answer the call and come to serve. This book is functionally an invitation for you, the reader, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, and Ms. Smith, to come to Washington or support those who can. Our goal is to assemble an army of aligned, vetted, trained, and prepared conservatives to go to work on day one to deconstruct the administrative state. The project is built on 4 pillars. Pillar I. This volume puts in one place a consensus view of how major federal agencies must be governed, and where disagreement exists brackets out these differences for the next president to choose a path. Pillar 2 is a personnel database that allows candidates to build their own professional profiles and our coalition members to review and voice their recommendations. These recommendations will then be collated and shared with the president-elect's team, greatly streamlining the appointment process. Pillar 3 is the Presidential Administration Academy, an online educational system taught by experts from our coalition. For the newcomer, this will explain how the government functions and how to function in government. For the experienced, we will host in-person seminars with advanced training and set the bar for what is expected of senior leadership. In Pillar IV, the playbook, we are forming agency teams and drafting transition plans to move out upon the president's utterance of "So help me God." As Americans living at the approach of our nation's 250th birthday, we have been given much. As conservatives, we are as much required to steward this precious heritage for the next generation. On behalf of our coalition partners, we thank you and invite you to come join with us at project2025.org. Paul Don, Director, Project 2025, 15. Authors: Darren Baxter's Deputy Director, Center for Energy and Environment, and Senior Fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, CEI. Before joining CEI, Darren was a Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, where he played a leading role in the launch of the organization's new Energy and Environmental Center. For a decade, he led Heritage's food and agricultural policy work, and he edited and co-authored Heritage's book Farms and Free Enterprise. He has testified numerous times before Congress, has appeared frequently on media outlets, and has played leadership roles in such organizations such as the Federalist Society, American Agricultural Law Association, and Food and Drug Law Institute. Serving on the Food and Drug Law Journal's editorial advisory board. Jonathan Berry is managing partner at Boyd & Gray & Associates PLLC. He served as acting assistant secretary for policy at the U.S. Department of Labor, overseeing all aspects of rulemaking and policy development. At the U.S. Department of Justice, he assisted with the development of regulatory policy and with the nominations of Justice Neil Gorsuch and dozens of other judges. He previously served as chief counsel for the Trump transition and earlier clerked for Associate Justice Samuel Alito and Judge Jerry Smith of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. He is a graduate of Yale College and Columbia University School of Law. Lindsay M. Burke is director of the Center for Education Policy at the Heritage Foundation. Burke served on Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin's Transition Steering Committee and Landing Team for Education. She serves on the Board of Visitors for George Mason University, the Board of the Educational Freedom Institute, and the Advisory Board of the Independent Women's Forum's Education Freedom Center. Dr. Burke's research has been published in such journals as Social Science Quarterly, Educational Research and Evaluation, and Research in Educational Administration and Leadership. She holds a BA from Hollins University, an MA from the University of Virginia, and a PhD from George Mason University. David R. Burton is Senior Fellow in Economic Policy in the Thomas A. Rowe Institute for Economic Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation. He focuses on securities regulation, tax policy, business law, entrepreneurship, administrative law, financial privacy, the U.S. Department of Commerce, corporate welfare. 16. Mandate for leadership. The Conservative Promise, International Investment, International Information Sharing, the U.S. Economic Relationship with China, and Climate-Related Financial Risk. Previously, Burton was General Counsel at the National Small Business Association, a partner in the Argus Group, Vice President, Finance, and General Counsel for New England Machinery, and manager of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Tax Policy Center. He holds a J.D. from the University of Maryland School of Law and a B.A. in Economics from the University of Chicago. Adam Kandub is a professor of law at Michigan State University. His scholarly research focuses on telecommunication, antitrust, and Internet issues. He served as Acting Assistant Secretary of Commerce and Deputy Associate Attorney General at the Justice Department during the Trump administration. He received his B.A. magna cum laude from Yale University and his J.D. magna cum laude from the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Dustin J. Carmack is Research Fellow for Cybersecurity, Intelligence, and Emerging Technologies in the Border Security and Immigration Center at the Heritage Foundation. Previously, he served in the intelligence community as Chief of Staff to the Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe. In Congress, he served as Chief of Staff to Congressman John Ratcliffe, TX-04, and Congressman Ron DeSantis, FL-06. Mr. Carmack studied at Truman State University in Missouri and Tel Aviv University in Israel. Brendan Carr has nearly 20 years of private sector and public sector experience in communications and tech policy. He currently serves as the senior Republican on the Federal Communications Commission. Prior to this role, Carr served as the Federal Communication Commission's General Counsel. Earlier, he worked as an attorney at Wiley Rain LLP. Previously, he clerked on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. After graduating from Georgetown University, he earned his J.D. magna cum laude from the Catholic University of America's Columbus School of Law, where he served as an editor of the Catholic University Law Review. Benjamin S. Carson, Sr., M.D., is founder and chairman of the American Cornerstone Institute and previously served as the 17th Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Born in Detroit to a single mother with a third-grade education, Dr. Carson was raised to love reading and education. He attended Yale and earned his MD from the University of Michigan Medical School. For nearly 30 years, Dr. Carson served as Director of Pediatric Neurosurgery at the Johns Hopkins Children's Center, where he performed the first separation of twins conjoined at the back of the head. 17. Authors Ken Cuccinelli served as Acting Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services in 2019 and then, from November 2019, through the end of the Trump administration, as Acting Deputy Secretary for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. During his tenure as Acting Deputy Secretary, Ken also served as the Chief Regulatory Officer for the Department of Homeland Security. He also has served the Commonwealth of Virginia, first as a state senator and then as Virginia's 46th Attorney General. Rick Dearborn served as Deputy Chief of Staff for President Donald Trump and was responsible for the day-to-day operations of 5 separate departments of the Executive Office of the President. He also served as Executive Director of the 2016 President-elect Donald Trump Transition Team. Before that, Rick served in several roles, including as Chief of Staff, in the office of then U.S. Senator Jeff Sessions RL, for nearly 2 decades. Between his 2 tours in Senator Sessions' office, he was appointed by President George W. Bush as Assistant Secretary of Energy for Congressional Affairs. Earlier in his career, Rick worked for the National Republican Senatorial Committee, the Senate Republican Conference, and the Senate Steering Committee. He graduated from the University of Oklahoma with a BA in Public Administration and a minor in Economics. Veronique DeRuggi is the George Gibbs Chair in Political Economy and Senior Research Fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University and a nationally syndicated columnist. Her primary research interests include the U.S. economy, the federal budget, taxation, tax competition, and cronyism. DeRuggi is the author of a weekly opinion column for the Creators Syndicate, writes regular columns for Reason magazine, and blogs about economics at National Review Online's The Corner. She received her MA in Economics from the Paris Dauphine University and her PhD in Economics from the Pantheon-Sorbonne University. Donald Devine is Senior Scholar at the Fund for American Studies in Washington, D.C. He was President Ronald Reagan's first-term Office of Personnel Management Director when the Washington Post labeled him Reagan's terrible swift sword of the civil service for cutting bureaucracy and reducing spending by billions of dollars. He was a professor at the University of Maryland and Bellevue University and is a columnist and author of 10 books, including his recent The Enduring Tension. Diana Furchtgedroth, an Oxford-educated economist, directs the Center for Energy, Climate, and Environment at the Heritage Foundation and is adjunct professor of economics at George Washington University. Diana served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Research and Technology at the U.S. Department of Transportation, where she directed the department's $1.2 billion research budget. The 18 Mandate for Leadership. The Conservative Promise Office of Positioning, Navigation and Timing in Spectrum Management, and the University Transportation Center program. Diana worked in senior roles in the White House under Presidents Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush, where she was Chief of Staff of the Council of Economic Advisers. Thomas F. Gilman served as Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Administration and Chief Financial Officer of the U.S. Department of Commerce in the Trump administration. Currently, he is a director of ACLJ Action and chairman of Torngat Metals. Tom is the former CEO of Chrysler Financial and has had a 40-plus year career as a senior executive and entrepreneur in the global automotive industry, including roles at Chrysler Corporation, Cerberus Capital Management, Asbury Automotive Group, TD Auto Finance, and Automotive Capital Services. He holds a BS in Finance from Villanova University. Mandy M. Gunasekara of Oxford, Mississippi, is a principal at Section 7 Strategies, a senior policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum, and visiting fellow in the Center for Energy, Climate, and Environment at the Heritage Foundation. During the Trump administration, Mandy served as the Chief of Staff at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency as well as Principal Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Office of Air and Radiation. She previously served in numerous roles at the U.S. House of Representatives and U.S. Senate, including as Majority Counsel for the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee under Chairman Jim Inhofe. She received her BA from Mississippi College and her JD from the University of Mississippi School of Law. Jean Hamilton is Vice President and General Counsel of America First Legal Foundation. Jean served as counselor to the Attorney General at the U.S. Department of Justice, senior counselor to the Secretary of Homeland Security, general counsel on the Senate Committee on the Judiciary, assistant chief counsel at U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and as an attorney advisor in the Secretary's Honors Program for attorneys at the Department of Homeland Security. Jean graduated from the Washington and Lee University School of Law magna cum laude and Order of the Coif and has a BA in International Affairs from the University of Georgia. Jennifer Hazelton has worked as a senior strategic consultant for the Department of Defense and Industrial Base Policy and has held senior positions at USAID, the Export-Import Bank of the United States, and the State Department. She was also a communications director in the U.S. Congress and worked as an award-winning journalist for CNN and Fox News Channel. Hazelton holds an MA in Business Administration from Emory University and earned her BA from the Univer. City of Georgia, 19. Authors Karen Kerrigan is President and CEO of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council and has helped to strengthen U.S. entrepreneurship and global business growth for 28 years. She has provided counsel across the globe via training missions focused on entrepreneurial development, effective advocacy, policy formation, and implementation. Karen testifies regularly before Congress and has served on numerous federal advisory boards representing the interests of entrepreneurs and small businesses. Dennis Dean-Kirk is Associate Director for Personnel Policy with the 2025 Presidential Transition Project at the Heritage Foundation. Born and raised in Kansas, he graduated with honors from Northern Arizona University and Washburn University Law School. Dennis has over 45 years of experience in private law and public federal government counsel services. He served in President George Bush's administration in the U.S. Army's Office of General Counsel and later as Associate General Counsel for Strategic Integration and Business Transformation, where he was recognized with the Exceptional Civilian and Meritorious Civilian Service Awards and other awards. During the Trump administration, Dennis served in senior positions at the Office of Personnel Management and was nominated by President Trump to be chairman of the Merit Systems Protection Board. Kent Lassman is president and CEO of the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Educated at the Catholic University of America and North Carolina State University, he has written on telecommunications, privacy, environmental, antitrust, and consumer protection regulation as well as trade policy and the design of regulatory systems. Kent's policy research and advocacy have taken him to 45 state capitals, more than a dozen countries, and deep into the heart of the federal regulatory state. Bernard L. McNamee is an energy and regulatory attorney with a major law firm and was formerly a member of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. He is also the Street Distinguished Visiting Professor of Law at the Appalachian School of Law. In addition to serving as a Federal Energy Regulatory Commissioner, McNamee has served in various senior policy and legal positions throughout his career, including at the U.S. Department of Energy, for U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, and for Virginia Governor George Allen. McNamee also served for attorneys general in 2 states, Virginia and Texas. Christopher Miller served in several positions during the Trump administration, including as acting U.S. Secretary of Defense, Director of the National Counterterrorism Center, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Combating Terrorism, and Senior Director for Counterterrorism and Transnational Threats at the National Security Council. Before his civilian service in the XX Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise Department of Defense, Miller was an Army Green Beret in the 5th Special Forces Group with multiple combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, achieving the rank of colonel. Miller earned a BA from George Washington University and an MA from the Naval War College. He also graduated from the College of Naval Command and Staff and the Army War College. Stephen Moore is a conservative economist and author. He is currently a senior economist at Freedom Works, a distinguished fellow at the Heritage Foundation, and a Fox News analyst. From 2005 to 2014, Moore served as the senior economics writer for the Wall Street Journal editorial page and as a member of the journal's editorial board. He still contributes regularly to the journal's editorial page. He is a frequent lecturer to business investment and university audiences around the world on the U.S. economic and political outlook in Washington, D.C. Moore Namdar is an attorney and senior fellow at the American Foreign Policy Council. She speaks fluent Farsi and is an expert on U.S. national security, human rights, global communications, the Middle East, and international law. Moore served as senior advisor for critical issues at the U.S. State Department and was appointed by President Donald Trump to perform the duties of the Assistant Secretary of State for Consular Affairs. She also served as Vice President of Legal, Compliance, and Risk at the U.S. Agency for Global Media. Peter Navarro holds a Ph.D. in economics from Harvard and was one of only 3 senior White House officials to serve with Donald Trump from the 2016 campaign to the end of the president's first term. He was the West Wing's chief China hawk and trade czar and served as director of the Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy and Defense Production Act Policy Coordinator. His books include The Coming China Wars, 2006, Death by China, 2011, Crouching Tiger, 2015, and his White House memoirs in Trump Time, 2021, and Taking Back Trump's America 2022. His top-rated Taking Back Trump's America podcast appears on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. William Perry Pendley was born in Cheyenne, Wyoming. He earned a BA and an MA from George Washington University, was a U.S. Marine Corps captain, and earned his JD from the University of Wyoming College of Law. He was an attorney on Capitol Hill, a senior official for President Ronald Reagan, and leader of the Bureau of Land Management for President Donald Trump. For 30 years, he was president of Mountain States Legal Foundation where he argued and won cases before the Supreme Court of the United States. He authored 5 books, including Sagebrush Rebel, Reagan's Battle with Environmental Extremists and Why It Matters Today, 21. Authors Max Primorak is director of the Douglas and Sarah Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation. He was acting chief operating officer and assistant to the administrator, Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, at the U.S. Agency for International Development. Previously he was deputy director of Iraq's reconstruction program at the U.S. Department of State and a senior advisor in the Office of the Secretary. Max was educated at Franklin and Marshall College and the University of Chicago. Roger Severino is Vice President of Domestic Policy at the Heritage Foundation. As Director of the Office for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS from 2017 to 2021, he led a team of more than 250 staff enforcing civil rights, conscience, and health information privacy laws. Roger subsequently founded the HHS Accountability Project at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. He holds a JD from Harvard Law School, an MA in Public Policy from Carnegie Mellon University, and a BA from the University of Southern California. Kyron K. Skinner is President and CEO of the Foundation for America and the World, Taub Professor of International Relations and Politics at Pepperdine University's School of Public Policy. W. Glenn Campbell Research Fellow at the Hoover Institution, and a visiting fellow and senior advisor at the Heritage Foundation. Skinner served as Director of Policy Planning and Senior Advisor at the U.S. Department of State from 2018 to 2019 and was a member of the Defense Business Board at the U.S. Department of Defense in 2020. Skinner holds an MA and a PhD in political science from Harvard University and undergraduate degrees from Spelman College and Sacramento City College. Brooks D. Tucker served in the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs as Assistant Secretary for Congressional and Legislative Affairs from 2017 to 2021 and as Acting Chief of Staff from 2020 to 2021. He helped to craft the policy framework for President-elect Trump's transition team and served as the Senior Policy Advisor for National Security and Veterans Affairs to Senator Richard Burr from 2010 to 2015. A retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel, Brooks served in Afghanistan, Iraq, North Africa, the Caucasus, and the Western Pacific. He is a graduate of the University of Maryland, Marine Corps Infantry Officer Course, and Marine Corps Command and Staff College and holds a certificate in legislative studies from Georgetown University. Hans A. von Spakovsky is Senior Legal Fellow and Manager of the Election Law Reform Initiative in the Edwin Meese Center III Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. He is a former member of President Donald Trump's Advisory Commission on Election Integrity. From 2006 to 2007, von, 22, Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise. Spakovsky was a commissioner on the Federal Election Commission. He served as career counsel to the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Justice from 2002 to 2005. Russ Vought is founder and president of the Center for Renewing America. A longtime conservative leader on Capitol Hill, Russ served in President Trump's cabinet as director of the Office of Management and Budget, where he oversaw the implementation of the presidential budget, key policies on deregulation, and a landmark effort to eliminate critical race theory and other radical ideologies in executive agencies. Prior to his White House service, Russ spent nearly 2 decades in the broader conservative movement on Capitol Hill, including as policy director for the House Republican Conference, Executive Director of the Republican Study Committee, and legislative assistant to former U.S. Senator Phil Gramm. Russ graduated with a BA from Wheaton College and received a JD from George Washington University Law School. William L. Walton is chairman of the Resolute Protector Foundation and host of The Bill Walton Show. In 2016 and 2017, Mr. Walton served in President-elect Donald Trump's transition team as agency action leader for all the federal economic agencies. He served as chairman of the board and CEO of Allied Capital Corporation, a $6 billion New York Stock Exchange-traded private investment firm, from 1997 to 2010. He is the immediate past president of the Council for National Policy. His extensive board service includes the Heritage Foundation, American Conservative Union, American Enterprise Institute, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, National Venture Capital Association, and Financial Services Roundtable. Paul Winfrey is Distinguished Fellow in Economic Policy and Public Leadership at the Heritage Foundation. Before rejoining Heritage in 2018, Paul was Deputy Assistant to the President, Deputy Director of the Domestic Policy Council, and Director of Budget Policy at the White House. During the 2016 presidential transition, he led the team responsible for the Office of Management and Budget. He also has served as a senior staff member for the U.S. Senate Committee on the Budget. Paul served in both the Biden and Trump administrations for 3 terms as the chair of the Fulbright Foreign Scholarship Board that oversees the Fulbright program and educational exchanges sponsored by the Department of State. Editors Paul Don is director of the 2025 Presidential Transition Project at the Heritage Foundation, organizing policy and personnel recommendations and training for appointees in the next presidential administration. Before joining Heritage, he served in the Trump administration as Chief of Staff at the U.S. Office of Personnel, 23. Management, as OPM's White House liaison, and as a senior advisor at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Paul has extensive experience in high-stakes commercial litigation and worked for several large international law firms in New York City from 1997 to 2012 before founding his own law firm. He is a graduate of the University of Virginia School of Law and received his graduate and undergraduate degrees from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Stephen Groves is the Margaret Thatcher Fellow in the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. Groves served in the Trump administration, first as Ambassador Nikki Haley's chief of staff at the U.S. mission to the United Nations. He later joined the White House as Assistant Special Counsel, representing the White House in the Mueller investigation. Groves also served as White House Deputy Press Secretary. His prior positions include Senior Counsel for the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations and Associate at Boies, Schiller and Flexner LLP. Groves holds an LLM from Georgetown University Law Center, a JD from Ohio Northern University's College of Law, and a BA from Florida State University. Contributors: the contributors listed below generously volunteered their time and effort to assist the authors in the development and writing of this volume's 30 chapters. The policy views and reform proposals herein are not an all-inclusive catalog of conservative ideas for the next president, nor is there unanimity among the contributors or the organizations with which they are affiliated with regard to the recommendations. Mark Albrecht, Chris Anderson, Office of Senator Steve Daines, Jeff Anderson, the American Main Street Initiative, Michael Anton, Hillsdale College, E.J. Antoni, the Heritage Foundation, Andrew Art Arthur, Center for Immigration Studies, Paul Atkins, Patamac Global Partners, Julie Axelrod, Center for Immigration Studies, James Bacon, James Bear, Stuart Baker, Steptoe and Johnson LLP, Eric Baptist, Alliance Defending Freedom, Brent Bennett, Texas Public Policy Foundation, John Burlaw, Competitive Enterprise Institute, Russell Berman, Hoover Institution, Sanjay Bhagat, University of Colorado Boulder, Stephen Billy, Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, Brad Bishop, American Cornerstone Institute, Willis Bixby, WWBX LLC, Josh Blackman, South Texas College of Law, Jim Blue, Defense of Freedom Institute for Policy Studies, Robert Bortons, Classical Conversations, Rachel Bovard, Conservative Partnership Institute, Robert Bose, Matt Bowman, Alliance Defending Freedom, Stephen G. Bradbury, the Heritage Foundation, Preston Brashers, the Heritage Foundation, Jonathan Bronitsky, Athos, Kyle Brosnan, the Heritage Foundation, 26, Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise, Patrick T. Brown, Ethics and Public Policy Center, Robert Burkett, ACLJ Action, Michael Burley, American Cornerstone Institute, David R. Burton, the Heritage Foundation, Jonathan Butcher, the Heritage Foundation, Mark Busby, Busby Maritime Associates, LLC, Margaret Byfield, American Stewards of Liberty, David Byrd, Korn Ferry, Anthony Compa, Center for Renewing America, James J. Carafano, the Heritage Foundation, Frank Carroll, Professional Forest Management, Orrin Cass, American Compass, Brian J. Kavanaugh, American Global Strategies, Spencer Chrétien, the Heritage Foundation, Claire Christensen, American Cornerstone Institute, Victoria Coates, the Heritage Foundation, Eli Kohanim, Independent Women's Forum, Ezra Cohen, Elbridge Colby, Marathon Initiative, Earl Comstock, White and Case LLP, Lisa Correnti, Center for Family and Human Rights, CFAM, Monica Crowley, the Nixon Seminar, Laura Cunliffe, Independent Women's Forum, Tom Don, Amber Wave Partners, Sohan Dasgupta, Taft Tintinia, San Hollister LLP, Sergio de la Peña, Krista Ryder, National Center for Urban Operations, Corey DeAngelis, American Federation for Children, Caroline DeBerry, Paragon Health Institute, Ariel Del Turco, Family Research Council, Irv Dennis, American Cornerstone Institute, David Depchula, Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies, Donald Devine, the Fund for American Studies, Chuck DeVore, Texas Public Policy Foundation, C. Wallace DeWitt, Allen Anovery LLP, James D. Payne, the Heritage Foundation, Matthew Dickerson, the Heritage Foundation, Michael Dinged, America First Legal Foundation, David Ditch, the Heritage Foundation, Natalie Dodson, Ethics and Public Policy Center, Dave Dorey, the Fairness Center, Max Eden, American Enterprise Institute, 27, Contributors, Troy Edgar, IBM Consulting, Joseph Edlow, the Heritage Foundation, Jen Ellinger, Booz Allen Hamilton, John Arrett, Office of Senator Josh Hawley, Kristen E. Chamer, the Heritage Foundation, Robert S. Itel, Defense of Freedom Institute for Policy Studies, Will Estrada, Parents' Rights Foundation, John Fearer, Center for Immigration Studies, Baruch Feigenbaum, Reason Foundation, Travis Fisher, the Heritage Foundation, George Fishman, Center for Immigration Studies, Leslie Ford, the Heritage Foundation, Aharon Friedman, Federal Policy Group, Bruce Fronin, Ohio Northern University College of Law, Joel Frushone, Finch Fulton, Diana Furchtgott-Roth, the Heritage Foundation, Kaylee Gable, American Cornerstone Institute, Christopher Gasek, Family Research Council, Alexandra Geiser, River Financial Incorporated, Mario Garza, Patty Jane Geller, the Heritage Foundation, Andrew Gillen, Texas Public Policy Foundation, James S. Gilmore III, Gilmore Global Group LLC, Vance Ginn, Economic Consulting, LLC, Alma Golden, The Institute for Women's Health Mike Gonzalez, the Heritage Foundation Chadwick R. Gore, Defense Forum Foundation David Gortler, Ethics and Public Policy Center Brian Gottstein, the Heritage Foundation Dan Greenberg. Competitive Enterprise Institute Rob Greenway, Hudson Institute Rachel Gressler, the Heritage Foundation DJ Gribben, Madras Consulting Garrison Griesdale, American Cornerstone Institute Joseph Grogan. USC Schaefer School for Health Policy and Economics Andrew Guernsey Jeffrey Gunter, Republican Jewish Coalition Joe Guy, Club for Growth Joseph Guzman Amalia Halikias, the Heritage Foundation Jean Hamilton. America First Legal Foundation, 28, Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise Richard Hanania, Center for the Study of Partisanship and Ideology Simon Hankinson, the Heritage Foundation David Harlow Derek Harvey. Office of Congressman Devin Nunes Jason Hayes, Mackinac Center for Public Policy Jennifer Hazelton Lou Heinzer Edie Hepel Troop Hemingway, Personnel Policy Operations Nathan Hitchen, Equal Rights Institute Pete Hoekstra Gabriella Hoffman. Independent Women's Forum Tom Homan, the Heritage Foundation Chris Horner Mike Howell, the Heritage Foundation Valerie Huber, the Institute for Women's Health Andrew Hughes, American Cornerstone Institute Joseph Hummeyer. Center for a Secure Free Society Christopher Iacovella, American Securities Association Melanie Israel, the Heritage Foundation Ken Ivory, Utah House of Representatives Roman Jankowski, the Heritage Foundation Abby Jones Emily Kyle. Alliance Defending Freedom Jared M. Kelson, Boyden Gray and Associates Aaron Kiriati, Ethics and Public Policy Center Ali Kilmartin, Alliance Defending Freedom Julie Kirchner, Federation for American Immigration Reform Dan Kish. Institute for Energy Research Kenneth A. Klukowski Adam Korzeniewski, American Principles Project Kathy Newbel-Kovarik, Sagita Solutions, LLC Bethany Cosma, Keystone Policy Matthew Cosma Julius Krein, American Affairs Stanley Kurtz. Ethics and Public Policy Center David Lacerte, Baker Botts, LLP Paul J. Larkin, the Heritage Foundation Kent Lassman, Competitive Enterprise Institute James R. Lawrence III, Envisage Law Paul Lawrence, Lawrence Consulting Nathan Leamer. Targeted Victory, 29, Contributors David Legates, University of Delaware, Rhett, Marlo Lewis, Competitive Enterprise Institute Ben Lieberman, Competitive Enterprise Institute John Ligon Evelyn Lim, American Cornerstone Institute Mario Loyola. Competitive Enterprise Institute John G. Malcolm, the Heritage Foundation Joseph Masterman, Cooper Ann Kirk, PLLC Earl Matthews, the Vandenberg Coalition Dan Muller, Heritage Action for America Drew McCall. American Cornerstone Institute Trent McCutter, Boyden Gray and Associates Micah Meadowcroft, the American Conservative Edwin Meese III, the Heritage Foundation Jessica Malugin, Competitive Enterprise Institute Frank Mermaud. Orpheus International Mark Miller, Office of Governor Kristi Noem Cleta Mitchell, Conservative Partnership Institute Kevin E. Moley Caitlin Moon, American Center for Law and Justice David Moore, Brigham Young University Law School Claire Morrell. Ethics and Public Policy Center Mark Morgan, the Heritage Foundation Hunter Morgan, American Cornerstone Institute Rachel Morrison, Ethics and Public Policy Center Jonathan Moy, the Heritage Foundation Ian Murray. Competitive Enterprise Institute Ryan Nabil, National Taxpayers Union Michael Nasi, Jackson Walker LLP Lucian Niemeyer, The Niemeyer Group, LLC Nezek Nikakter, Wiley Rain LLP Milan Mitch Nikolic Matt O'Brien. Immigration Reform Law Institute Caleb Orr, Boyden Gray and Associates Michael Pack Leah Peterson Michael Pillsbury, The Heritage Foundation Patrick Pizzella, Leadership Institute Robert Poole, Reason Foundation Christopher B. Porter Kevin Priskenis. Alimer Health Solutions Pim Pryor, National Committee for Religious Freedom, XXX, Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise Thomas Pyle, Institute for Energy Research John Ratcliffe, American Global Strategies Paul Ray. The Heritage Foundation Joseph Redden, Flexilis Forestry, LLC J.W. Richards, The Heritage Foundation Jordan Richardson, High Suarez Melville, Pennsylvania. Jason Richwine, Center for Immigration Studies Sean Riley, The American Conservative Laura Reese, The Heritage Foundation Leo Rios Mark Robeck, Energy Evolution Consulting LLC James Rockus, ACLJ Action Mark Royce, Nova. Annandale College Reed Rubenstein, America First Legal Foundation William Ruger, American Institute for Economic Research Austin Ruse, Center for Family and Human Rights CFAM, Brent D. Sadler, The Heritage Foundation Alexander William Salter. Texas Tech University John Sanders, John Locke Foundation Carla Sands, America First Policy Institute Robbie Stephanie Saunders, Coalition for a Prosperous America David Sov Brett D. Schaefer, the Heritage Foundation Nina Alcharenko Schaefer. The Heritage Foundation Matt Schuck, American Cornerstone Institute Justin Schwab, CGCN Law John Schwett, American Principles Project Mark Scribner, Reason Foundation Darren Selnick Consulting Josh Sewell. Taxpayers for Common Sense Kathleen Scamma, Western Energy Alliance Matt Sharp, Alliance Defending Freedom Judy Shelton, Independent Institute Nathan Symington Lauren Smith, Skyline Policy Risk Group Zach Smith, The Heritage Foundation Jack Spencer. The Heritage Foundation Adrian Sparrow, U.S. House Committee on Homeland Security Thomas W. Spoer, The Heritage Foundation Peter St. Onge, The Heritage Foundation Chris Stanley, Functional Government Initiative Paula M. Stannard Parker Stathidus. Texas Public Policy Foundation William Steiger, Independent Consultant Kenny Stein, Institute for Energy Research Corey Stewart, Stewart PLLC Mari Stull Catherine T. Sullivan, 1792 Exchange Brett Swearingen. Miller Johnson Michael Sweeney Robert Swope Aaron Zabo, CGCN Group Katie Delento, All Better Health Tony Tada Leadership Group, LLC Farnaz Farkish Thompson Todd Thurman, American Cornerstone Institute Brett Tolman Group Kayla M. Tonnessen, Recovery for America Now Foundation Joe Trotter, American Legislative Exchange Council Tevi Troy, Mercatus Center Clayton Tufts Aaron Valdez, Texas Public Policy Foundation Mark Vandroff Jessica M. Vaughn. Center for Immigration Studies John J. V. Venable, The Heritage Foundation Morgan Lorraine Vigna, Jewish Institute for National Security of America Andrew N. Vollmer, Mercatus Center Hans A. von Spakovsky, The Heritage Foundation Greg Walcher. Natural Resources Group, LLC David M. Walsh, Dakota Group Aaron Walsh, The Heritage Foundation Jacqueline Ward, American Cornerstone Institute Emma Waters, The Heritage Foundation Michael Williams. American Cornerstone Institute Aaron Wolf Jonathan Wolfson Alexei Woltornist, Athos Frank Wuko Cesar Ibarra, Freedom Works John Zadrozny, America First Legal Foundation Laura Zork, Freedom Works.